Hello everyone. Under the valuable guidance of our principal ma'am, Mrs. Shaminder Palkar, myself Taruna from Akal Academy Reethkheri is going to deliver lecture on female reproductive system. So students, in my previous video, I have explained how sexual reproduction takes place in animals, how male gamete fuses with the female gamete to form a fertilized cell that is called zygote, and how new individual is formed. So in this video, I am going to explain female reproductive system in detail. So female reproductive system consists of ovaries, fallopian tube, which is also called oviduct. Then it consists of bag-like uterus, then cervix, then vagina. These are the organs of reproductive system, female reproductive system, and ovaries are oval-shaped organ which are present inside the abdominal cavity of a female near the kidneys. A woman has two ovaries. Ovaries are the primary reproductive organ in females. The function of ovaries are: number 1, it produces eggs. Number 2, it produces two sex hormones. One is progesterone and other is estrogen. These two sex hormones are also produced by ovaries. So these two are the functions of ovaries. Then each ovary is composed of several thousand of follicles. Follicles means a kind of unripe eggs. At the age of puberty, puberty is the age when the boys and girls become sexually mature. At this age, sex hormones begin to produce, they are able to reproduce. So at this age, puberty age, these unmature follicles become mature, means they are able to produce mature eggs. Then just above the ovaries, the tube-like structure is called fallopian tube, or we can say oviduct. Oviducts are not directly connected to the ovaries. It has a funnel-shaped structure which is called funnel of the oviduct, which covers the ovary, on both sides. Now, then we have a bag-like structure. This bag-like structure is called uterus. And the uterus is connected to the narrow opening that is called cervix. And cervix is connected to another tube that is called vagina. So I will explain the function of these organs. First of all, I already explained the function of ovaries. Now, the function of oviduct. In oviduct, fertilization of sperm and egg takes place. It is the place where the fertilization takes place, means the fusion of female gamete with the male gamete takes place in the oviduct. And in uterus, the growth and development of fertilized egg, means zygote, takes place in a bag-like structure that is called uterus. The vagina receives the penis for putting sperms into the women's body, and vagina is a tubular structure. It is also called birth canal because it is through this passage that the baby is born. It is through this passage the baby is born. Now, I will explain in my next diagram how the fertilization takes place. Now, in human beings, as I have already explained in my previous video, the internal fertilization takes place. The sperms which are made in the testes of the male are introduced into the vagina of the woman through penis by mating. In this, there are so many sperms entering in the vagina and then goes upward and reaches the fallopian tube. In the fallopian tube, oviduct contains egg cell. Oviduct contains egg cell. This egg cell is released by the ovary. Thus, one sperm at a time meet with the egg cell to form zygote. So, we can say that fertilization takes place in the oviduct. So, we can say the fusion of male and female gamete takes place in the oviduct. Oviduct is a place, or we can say fallopian tube is a place where fertilization takes place. It is very important from board point of view also. They may ask many times this question, the where fertilization takes place. So students, fertilization takes place in the oviduct only, that is fallopian tube. So when the zygote is formed, the divisions takes place in the zygote. Now see in this diagram, single cell zygote is formed. Zygote divides rapidly. It moves down slowly and divides rapidly into 2 cells, 4 cells, 8 cells, 16 cells, 32 cells like this, and forms a hollow ball of hundreds of cells. Forms a hollow ball of hundreds of cells in the uterus. So this is called embryo. This is called embryo. Embryo sinks into the soft and thick lining of the uterus. This is the lining of the uterus. Embryo sinks into the soft and thick lining of the uterus. I mean to say, the embedding of embryo in the thick lining of the uterus is called implantation. The embedding of embryo in the thick lining of the uterus is called implantation. So implantation of the embryo takes place inside the uterus. Now, after the implantation of the embryo, disc-shaped tissue develops. This is the disc-shaped tissue which develops between the uterus wall and embryo. The disc-shaped tissue is called placenta, which develops between the uterus wall and embryo. What is the function of this placenta? It is through this placenta only that all the requirements of the developing fetus like nutrition, respiration, excretion, etc. are met from the mother's body. I mean to say that exchange of nutrients, oxygen, waste products between the embryo and the mother takes place through this placenta. So, the time period from the fertilization up to the birth of the baby, the time period from fertilization up to the birth of the baby is called gestation period. Is called gestation period. During this gestation period, the fetus, this is the fetus, grows inside the uterus of the mother to become a baby. To become a baby. Now I will explain how the birth of the baby takes place. Now birth of the baby starts when the strong muscles in the wall of the uterus contracts rhythmically. Rhythmic contraction of the uterus muscles gradually pushes the baby out of the mother's body through vagina. Through vagina. This is how a baby is born. Now, here we will cover the topic, the difference, what is the difference between zygote, embryo and fetus. These three are related terms. I am going to explain the difference between zygote, embryo and fetus. So zygote, you know very well, it is formed by the fusion of male and female gamete, that is sperm and eggs. And embryo is formed by the repeated divisions of the zygote, and fetus is formed by the growth and development of the embryo. So these 3 points are there, that zygote is formed by the fusion of male and female gametes, and embryo is formed by the repeated division of the zygote, and fetus is formed by the growth and development of the embryo. Zygote is the beginning of the formation of the baby. Embryo is the unborn baby in the uterus in the early stages, and fetus is a unborn baby in the uterus. Fetus is the unborn baby in the uterus in the later stages. Embryo is in the early stages and fetus is in the later stages of the development. Zygote is single cell, embryo is multicellular, and fetus is also multicellular. Now what is the difference here between embryo and fetus? When the embryo stage is there, the body features of the growing baby are not much developed. Body features means arms, legs, head, etc. They are not much developed. But at fetus stage, fetus is also multicellular. In fetus stage, the body features of the developing baby like hands, legs, head, etc. can be identified. So this is the difference between embryo and the fetus. Now, in my next topic, I will explain the sexual cycle in females. That is called menstruation also. So, when the girl child is born, her ovaries already contains many thousands of unripe eggs, and when the girl reaches at the age of puberty is the age of about 10 to 12 years in case of girls, the sex hormones released in her blood and causes some of the eggs in her ovaries to mature. So this mature egg is released by the ovary. The release of egg from the ovary is called ovulation. The release of egg from the ovary is called ovulation, and the ovulation occurs once in a 28 days. The menstrual cycle is of 28 days. Ovulation occurs once in a 28 days. In normal healthy girl, ovulation takes place 14th day of the beginning of the menstrual cycle. Menstrual cycle is of 28 days. It means in the middle of the menstrual cycle, that is the 14th day, the ovulation takes place. And in case of girls, before every ovulation, the inner lining of the uterus becomes thick. Before every ovulation, the inner lining of the uterus becomes thick and soft with lot of blood capillaries in it. These changes in the uterus are necessary because in case the egg released by the ovary get fertilized by the sperm, then the uterus has to keep that fertilized egg also. So that's why these changes in the uterus are very necessary. Now, when the fertilization does not take place, then when the fertilization does not takes place, then the uterus lining breaks down. The breaking of uterus lining produce, here we see in this diagram, the uterus lining break down. The breaking of uterus lining produce blood along with other tissue, and this blood and other tissue comes out in the form of bleeding from the vagina, and this is called vaginal bleeding or menstruation. This is called vaginal bleeding or menstruation. So the breakdown and removal of inner thick and soft lining of the uterus along with blood vessels in the form of vaginal bleeding is called menstruation, or we can say it is called menstrual flow. So this is how the menstruation occurs in females. Menstruation usually occurs after 14 days after ovulation. In the middle of the ovulation, in the middle of the cycle, ovulation takes place, that is the 14th day, and menstruation usually occurs 14 days after ovulation, and it lasts for about 3 to 5 days. It lasts for about 3 to 5 days. After menstruation is over, again the inner lining of the uterus become thick. Again the inner lining of the uterus become thick to receive the fertilized egg. And if the fertilization does not take place, again the menstruation occurs. So the process of menstruation cycle is controlled by hormones. And I want to clear this thing that menstruation stops temporarily when the egg gets fertilized. I mean to say, when the woman gets pregnant, then this menstruation stops. Temporarily, I mean to say. So, after the discussion of menstrual cycle, I will discuss two more important terms, that is menarche and menopause. The first occurrence of menstruation at the age of puberty is called menarche. Menarche is the beginning of the reproductive cycle, beginning of the reproductive life of a girl, we can say. So, menarche is the beginning of the start of the reproductive cycle of a girl. And menopause is the permanent stoppage of the menstruation. When the menstruation permanently stops in women, it is called menopause, and usually it occurs at the age of about 45 to 50 years. That women stop ovulating at menopause stage and can no longer become pregnant also. So menopause is the end of the reproductive life of a woman, as menarche is the beginning of the reproductive life of a girl. So menopause is the end of the reproductive cycle of a woman. So we can say that the reproductive life of a woman starts at menarche and ends at menopause. So this is how the female reproductive system functions, and this is how the sexual cycle occurs in females. Thank you very much.